In the grim darkness of the far future, legions of Chaos Space Marines sow death and destruction across the galaxy. The most bloodthirsty legionnaires may find themselves obsessed with indulging in the simplicity and intimacy of melee combat, reveling in the spilling of gore and viscera with one's own hands. This lust for violence attracts the attention of powerful demonic entities who are willing to merge with the warrior, granting them the power to warp their very bodies into terrifying weaponry. Now an unholy abomination of flesh metal and demonic energy, these hulking beasts have become Mutilators, masters of multiple melee methods of mashing and maiming their, victims. Shut up. Yes, friends, today I'll be making a Mutilator, as I was hoping to have a smaller video to work on after, I figured I'd make a Terminator Lord for the Brothers Paradox. However, as I got to working on the miniature I was going to use, in particular this Sons of Horus Cataphracti Praetor, I was dissatisfied that none of my HQ units for this army were very demon-y. One of my favorite units in the Codex are the Obliterators, the ranged counterpart to the melee Mutilators. The Obliterators received new models in 2019's Shadowspear box. It's very scary to think that Shadowspear was that long ago, and the essence of that simple revelation fills me with a existential dread deep within my bones. Anyways, the Obliterators got new models, and Mutilators got squatted out of the Codex entirely in 9th edition, which greatly upsets me and the other 4 guys that actually liked Mutilators. So I decided to take my Terminator Lord and make him a Mutilator Lord instead. If you compare the Chaos Terminator and Mutilator stat lines from 8th edition, which was the last edition Mutilators were featured in, you can see they sort of share characteristics anyways. Deep Strike, Invuln, similar-ish stats. It's good enough for me, so let's get to it. For the base of this model, I'll be appropriately stealing the old Obliterator bodies from the Chaos Marine Start Collecting box, which, if you weren't aware, is just the Chaos half of Shadowspear with some new packaging. If you'll recall, I used a bunch of the Obliterator parts for a new Obliterator conversion that utilized Storm Fiends, but the bodies themselves were untouched. So I took the one with a heavy bolter and a plasma gun mounted to his back to use as a combi plas. From here I began assembly, taking care to fill as many gaps as I can and scrape off every mold line. I used some sprue goo to assemble the bulk of the body. I could have used plastic glue or super glue here, but I've actually had this sprue goo mix on my desk for months. If you're unaware, it's just plastic cement with some old sprue thrown in. However, there wasn't enough plastic glue in my mix, so it was ultra thick. So I used this model as an opportunity to finally dial it in to a good consistency so I could actually, use it, and now it works fine. Now for the arms of the Mutilator, I had initially opened every bits box I had to find some suitable arms to attach. The original concept saw to a multi-armed beast that would encompass every weapon variation that a normal Terminator Lord could take. This went through a lot of permutations, from 3-armed to a pair of underslung lightning claws to potentially poaching a big smashy ball from the Storm Fiends kit. However, when I went to search for inspiration on Google, I found myself really enjoying some of the conversions with just 2 arms. I decided to roll the idea back and just have 2 arms, but I wanted to have a cool right arm. I stole the Bone Sword arm from the same box as Greater Possessed, which worked out twofold. Not only does my HQ unit have one of the coolest bits in the entire model range to swing around, but if I were to use that Greater Possessed model in the future, which I totally will be, by the way, it's already altered, which will help me make it look different from the standard assembly. Before I attach the previously mentioned Bone Sword, I cut off the front of his head cavity area, as assembling it beforehand has left the head unable to actually slot in as intended. Thankfully, the armor plate that goes over this area covers this cut entirely, leaving me to use a bit of green stuff and extra sprue to get the head positioned just how I want it. And just in case you're curious, there are 2 obliterators in this box. The reason this head doesn't fit in the body as intended is because it's the other obliterator's head. You know, so just a little swap, yeah. The new obliterator models have what is commonly referred to as the diaper, which, yeah, it looks really dumb. So I mixed some green stuff and milliput together to make a waist wrap. Not only will this hide the dreaded diaper, but also allow me to paint on the HQ mandatory animal print that my army has. As it began to cure, I distressed the bottom of the cloth, then positioned it in a way to suggest some dynamic movement, some flowing cloth, you know. When this cured, I had a general shape that I didn't hate, although you can see the sloppy application front and center. Thankfully, this putty mixture is very easy to carve, so I used my knife to carve out the imperfections and scrape the major areas of the cloth smooth. With that done, I make up some more of the same putty mixture and apply it over the problem area, simultaneously cleaning up the spots I'd shaved down too close and sculpting in a more defined peak to the raised cloth. Afterwards, I took some green stuff and made a distressed top of the cloth, as if it was secured under the belt but folded over it. It's a little cheeky way to have an area to show off the underside color of the cloth and suggest the presence of a belt that isn't technically there. Plus, it matches the overfolding cloth detail on the front of the model, you know, just for the sake of consistency. With all the cloth out of the way, I filled the gaps on the side of the model with old sprue and my sprue goo mix. Probably a job for putty, but again, I was working on my sprue goo mix ratio. I positioned the mini over the greater possessed sprue with the bone sword arm to kind of double check if I liked the idea or not, which I did, then proceeded to extract the arm with that old saw I found laying around. I'm genuinely still confused as to where this thing came from, but I'd be lying if I said it wasn't useful. So the one arm I was certain I wanted to use was another leftover obliterator power fist, which I was determined to keep as is. But while flipping through my bits boxes, I found a couple of Chaos Terminator chain fists where the fingers are chainsaws and they're kind of fused together, you know. That's probably one of my favorite bits for Chaos Marines in general, and I wanted to bring that onto my Mutilator Lord, which will hopefully help bring its roots as a Terminator Lord back to the forefront, you know? I snipped the fingers off of the Power Fist and attached 2 chain swords from the Legionnaires kit. I didn't really worry about it looking too smooth, as I knew I was going to cover the area in a fleshy texture later. With the new chain fist assembled, I pinned it and the bone sword arm to the torso. Due to the big pauldron, the chain fist only needed some minimal gap filling, but the bone sword needed some muscular resculpting as it was smaller than the chain fist arm. Now I need to recreate some tubing, and for that I'm going to use a new product here. This is wound copper wire coil from Zinge Industries. Chris from Offbeat Builds here on YouTube has been using this to great effect, so I decided to try it out for myself. Normally for this job I'd use regular guitar string, but guitar string can be very stiff and hold some pretty nasty angles if you bend it the wrong way. These wound up coils are much more flexible, making for a cable that's not only easier to get a good looking result with, but also physically easier to work with so you don't hurt your little baby hands. So far, I like it, and I'm glad I bulk purchased some varying sizes for the future. I'll leave a link to that store in the description below, just in case you want to try these out for yourself. I think it came out pretty well, honestly. It's time to get to texturing the flesh, so I break out my gel super glue, my Mod Podge, and this empty can of Coke Zero that I'll be using as a sacrificial palette. I apply the Mod Podge over the area I want to be gross, and shovel some gel super glue onto it. The 2 glues react in some chemical fashion I cannot even begin to describe to you guys, which allows you to sculpt in some rough texture that I've gotten great mileage out of on this army. I apply it to the areas I want to blend in, like the chain fist blades, but also to the smooth, bulbous flesh on the backside of the model. During this process, I also kind of wondered if you could use Mod Podge to recreate that kind of like fleshy cable, or like the cable with the flesh sleeve on it that you see on like a lot of Chaos models. I piled some glue heavily onto that Zinge industry wire from earlier, and while obviously the result isn't right in front of you, but I'll go ahead and say that it actually worked pretty damn well. Just takes a little long to dry out, but if you're looking for an easy way to replicate those kind of little cables, it doesn't get any easier than this, honestly. You could cover the entire thing in putty and then slice out little ovals, but this took like 40 seconds, With all the flesh taken care of, we can move on to painting. This is the exact method of how I normally paint my army, which I've covered numerous times already, so I wanted to take this chance to go ahead and thank my patrons. My Patreon has exploded since the Mythos Angelica Mortis video, and I cannot possibly describe to you all how appreciative I am for that outpour of support. I'd like to go ahead and give a shout out to the new patrons that have joined since the last video. Friendship Bearer, Philip Mitchell, Holly Graham, Necromancer Prawn, Max, Kriegsman, Halathane, Alpha Proxy, James, So Below, Clemens Zinner, and Dude with a Bagel. If it's a toasted cinnamon bagel with a little butter on it, I will fight you over, but otherwise, enjoy that bagel, my dude. My patrons are such a huge pillar of this channel, and I can't thank you enough for the monetary validation and the delusions of grandeur it spurs. Like, it's just crazy to think about, and I genuinely can't articulate it, obviously. If you like what I do here, please consider supporting me on Patreon, and you'll get some goodies in exchange, such as weekly updates and behind-the-scenes work-in-progress images. You'll also get entered in any kind of giveaways I do or whatnot, but there's no obligation to do any of that. My content will always be free here on YouTube, and just having you here watching this is already way more than I deserve. Thank you. And here's the finished Mutilator Lord. I'm actually really, really proud of how this mini came out. Like, not only does it just look sick as all hell, but I actually painted it an agreeable amount of time as well to a standard I think looks pretty good. As my other HQ units sport the leopard print and the tiger stripes, I gave my Mutilator Lord the white tiger stripes to keep with the gaudy big cat theme, although I'm kind of running out of big cats, so I think the next guy will have something slightly different. Maybe snake. I like snake print. You can also see that I added some blue veins to the marble flooring. This is the same kind of blue veins that I did for my Chaos Knight base, and I think I'll keep doing this going forward. I always felt like my marble bases were a bit too plain, so I'm looking for more ways to spice up the basing in the future. While I was a bit apprehensive about ditching the multi-arm idea, I think I ended up settling on something that I like a lot more overall. Even if the bone sword arm is very slightly on the small side, I feel like the pauldron spikes and the big bone sword both come together and give it the illusion of being a little bit larger than it is. Speaking of size though, the Mutilator Lord is noticeably larger than a normal Chaos Marine unit like my Sword Sorcerer, but compared to my modified Obliterators, he's a little bit on the small side. I don't really mind that too much though. He looks so gnarly in melee combat that I bet even old armor here wouldn't want to mess with him up close. And that's it for today. Like I said, just a simple little character project today to kind of help cleanse the palette. I've got the next project planned out and it's already in the works, although this does make me want to go back and add some more units to my armies. Not really sure how I want to balance that compared to the channel content specific projects, but there's no rush for my personal armies, honestly. I'd rather keep focus on models that I can use on the channel rather than just build my arm, like focus on building my army. But if there's an overlap, then hey, that's great. We are very close to 10K subscribers. As I record this, we're at 9,800, and the dawn of your dudes is rapidly approaching at that 10K mark. My Fire Prism recasting video is in progress as well. I've been doing some preliminary materials testing just to make sure I can get a refund on Amazon just in case, but I'll keep working on that after the announcement video for Your Dudes 2 goes up. So yeah, don't worry. All you Expedite fans, including me, don't worry. You know, things are still in the works. Thank you to everybody who's been supporting the channel up to now. It's gonna get a little busy on my end soon, but I'll always try to give you guys a general idea of what I'm doing. If you guys don't pay attention to my community tab, I highly suggest you just check on it every once in a while, because I do post there. I try to do it at least once a week, you know. I also do weekly updates on Patreon, but whenever the Your Dudes 2 announcement video shows up, you'll see it in your sub box. I'll put it on the community tab. I'll put it everywhere just to make sure the most visibility possible. But that's it for today. Thank you for watching. I hope you liked the mini, and I'll see you next time.